Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Mish, and today I have the honor of interviewing Cheryl. Yay! Cheryl, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yay! All right, are you ready to start the interview?
I am.
All right. All right, if you're willing, would you please share how addiction has affected your life and some of your experience in recovery?
First, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting me today and for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of my history here with Y12SR. Um, I think, like so many of us, I was brought up in a culture that addiction, and specifically in my upbringing, alcohol was just normalized. It was everywhere. And I really didn't even realize it was a problem until it was a problem. And in my childhood, I even remember it back to my teenage years, addiction and this idea of craving has always been a part of my body. And it started with food. It started with sugar. And then it kind of moved into, it started for me, my addiction background started with eating disorders, compulsive binging. And in my high school years, in my early 20s, bulimia was bulimia caused some severe health issues and mental health issues. I got a handle on it really quickly because I could barely function. But the idea of numbing, this idea of not wanting to feel and using something, I feel like it's been a part of me for as long as I can remember. And I love when I think about my story and when I share it now, the idea of whack-a-mole that Nikki talks about, and the way that we as individuals sometimes just move from one addiction to the other to the other. The eating disorder was the first experience for me that truly brought me into a path of healing and recovery in my early 20s. But all I did was just mask the symptoms. I got the behavior of the eating disorder under control because I physically was not able to function and live. And yet, everything that was underlying it still remained an issue. So that's when the alcoholism and the substance abuse really started to flourish, as also what would happen in a typical college student, and this idea of experimentation and this idea of fitting in, wanting to belong, because I always had this feeling of not belonging. And then in my 30s and 40s, making a long story very short, the trauma and grief and loss, and all of a sudden, this addiction or alcohol, which was serving a function and was manageable for me, it became something that I needed and I had to have, because I couldn't feel the pain from numerous losses and grief. And so, I think it's how the addiction, the disease of alcoholism progresses. And then I found myself in my mid to late 40s, just not being able to stop and not being able to control, and then living in shame, remorse, guilt, and that cycle, because then at this point I knew better, and yet I still wasn't able to help myself because I wasn't ready yet to reach out for help. So that's kind of my long story in a short synopsis.
Absolutely. Thank you. Would you please share a little bit about your introduction to yoga and when and how you recognized that yoga was a support to recovery?
Yoga, for me, yoga opened my heart. And I was one of those people that found yoga. And I think maybe some of your community can relate. I am a mom. I live in a community where I was brought up in this idea that we don't really talk about our feelings. We keep everything stuffed down. We don't really reach out for help. It was a very individualistic type of upbringing. And so I was suffering alone for many years. And I was a writer, and I was writing an article, and I discovered a local yoga studio. I had been dabbling in yoga for years. One of those, like, once a week, it felt good, maybe twice a month. And when I discovered this studio and the practice, at the time it was Ashtanga, which I look back and it was a rigorous, strict practice, but it set something off, and I began to feel at the level of body, and I began to use yoga as a tool to begin the healing process. I was really damaged at that point, and I was not yet in recovery. I had been in recovery for years with my eating disorders. That was something I managed for 20 years, but I didn't have a recovery program. And so I really believe yoga began to, I talk about my 200-hour training. It opened my heart, and it gave me the ability to feel again. And that's when healing was able to begin.
Oh, I can so relate. I remember you reminded me of something that my parents used to say from things that were going on in our household. Family business is family business. It stays in this house. Yeah, I can so relate.
Yeah. So I was breaking a pattern. That was something that I remember when I had my first training with Nikki. And I think I know we're going to be talking about that.
So go ahead.
I'll let you ask the question, and then I'll continue.
When and why did you take the Y12SR training, and what was your intention when taking the training?
Okay. So my first training was done in Setauket at the Mindful Turtle, and that was my 200-hour training. And it was a great program, and I was brand new. And so anyone that was coming to the studio to teach, I was all in. And Nikki was on the calendar, and I had just finished my 200-hour. It was 2014. I was in love with how I was feeling, and I knew deep in my heart, I knew addiction was an issue. I wasn't even ready or close to ready to look at it yet, but I was intrigued as to what she was coming here to teach. So she was coming to teach the leadership training. I actually did them backwards. I did one first. She was teaching the leadership training, and it was a weekend I will never forget, because she spoke of things that in my heart I never knew that other people suffered from. Mm-hmm. She spoke of how addiction and how substances and how the sense of the lost self, and how it can be used as a vehicle for change, mm-hmm. and to heal. And I just remember and what I think really, really struck me, I still remember to this day, my kids were really little at the time I was there. And she talked about how we could break the cycle, the epigenetics. And that just, because this, for me, my family came from just, the history was generation and generation of addiction and struggle and disease, because it's all we knew. It's all that, it's how we were conditioned. It's how we were raised. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was my first introduction to Y12SR. And that was in 2014. And it set me on a path of recovery. Mm-hmm. I did the training again. In my history, in my story, in my journey, Y12SR was my launching pad. It opened the door for me to really begin to look at. First, I was looking at my family and my conditioning, and how addiction had shaped who I was. That was the first conversation I needed to have with myself. And then once I began realizing that there was a connection between the depression, the way I was feeling, the not enoughness, and it led me on a path of self-discovery and self-realization. Nikki also, I don't know if you know this, she she had given me, she awarded a scholarship to the Game Changers of Yoga conference. It was in Estes, Colorado.
Mhm.
And myself and another Watchover Serum leader, she brought to that conference. That was around 2015. And that weekend changed my life. It was a weekend where I met the teachers from Off the Mat. I met the teachers from Embodied Love Movement. And then it all just started integrating. And the work of intersecting our wellness, community wellness, the idea of finding support within others and looking outside of ourselves, but finding other amazing men and women that were on this path. It was all for me, this coming together of yoga and community and healing. It was a journey that that eventually led me to traditional 12-step fellowship, sobriety, and sharing these practices with others. It's only been 7 years, probably about 7 years. And my journey for a long time I felt was backwards, but I realize now it was exactly the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
And I did do the training twice, I will add, because I think it's a great part of my story is that I did the training the first time with Watchover Serum as I was discovering how this program was going to support myself and be part of the work I do in the world. And then as I embraced a path of recovery a little over 2 years ago and decided to also bring in traditional 12-step fellowship and truly surrender, I did the training again with Dana Walters. And that was such a beautiful experience to now do the work again as someone who was someone that was committed to sobriety and committed to really sharing this work and becoming a part of the Watchover Serum community.
Yay, I love it. Thank you. I think you may have already answered this, but I'll ask you again, just for clarification. How long have you been holding the space for Watchover Serum meetings? And can you share some of the feelings, experiences, knowings that come from being a Watchover Serum space holder? And then after that, I'm just going to ask you to share a little bit about what you're doing in the recovery community, as well as Watchover Serum. And I just want to tap in a little bit about the Watchover Serum embodied love movement training that you're doing, just so that people know about it.
So Watchover Serum, I became a space holder, and we first started holding some live meetings, and we did that within the community here on Long Island. We led Watchover Serum. I co-facilitated those meetings probably for about 2 years, and we had a variety of students. It was a beautiful experience. And then more recently, about a year ago, as we entered into COVID and coronavirus, myself and others, we really felt a need immediately when we went into shutdown to bring these meetings to other individuals that were isolated. And I remember when you and I started about a year ago discussing how can we get these meetings online, and I have been holding space with Watchover Serum trainer and leader Dana Walters on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's coming up on a year now that we have our meeting. And just last night, we had such beautiful discussions, and we have a beautiful community that shows up each week. And without this group and these meetings were a integral part of my isolation and my COVID journey. We have formed a fellowship in the Watchover Serum community online that is so rich and so powerful. And I'm blessed to be a part of that work.
Mm.
And we see it continuing, we really have, it's amazing the power of connection, even over a virtual environment. The work that we have been bringing to, or we're putting together for Y12SR, so Embody Love Movement is also an organization that I'm on the faculty of. The founder, Dr. Melanie Moore, has been a part of Y12SR as a faculty member in trainings, and I know in your summit weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The work of Embody Love Movement is looking at how we create a narrative, and how, for me personally, I'll speak for me personally, this idea of not enoughness, this idea of looking outside of myself, filling that hole that was within, that was something that was at the core of my addiction. And I turned for decades to not only substance, but also to relationship, to the relationship I had with my own self. Mm-hmm. And this disconnect I had with my physical body, but also with my spirit. Mm-hmm. It was at the heart of what I was trying to heal, and what needed healing. So Embody Love Movement it's work where we look at this relationship we have with self. We look at finding tools to build self-esteem, to build self-worth, and to find positive, radical, we call it radical body acceptance. It's really the workshop that we're putting together for the Y12SR community is looking at the work of Embody Love Movement, looking at why it is women and men from all different walks of life have this feeling of not enoughness. And where does that come from? Looking at the media literacy, looking at what media tells us is beautiful, looking at how we have, as a society, put a certain body type and women and men as the standard of what is beautiful. And every time that we compare ourselves to that image, they say the comparison is the thief of joy. And how can we take that culture of comparison and reverse it and find our worthiness from within? And it's not an easy process, but when we find our self-worth and we learn the tools and skills to find our self-worth from within, and to start tuning out that negative noise. And many times that negative noise is our own thoughts. It's our own dialogue. And so in Embody Love Movement, we really unpack that dialogue. We look at it, we name it. We talk about how we've been shamed, how we have shamed ourselves, how we have been brought up in this culture that really can be so detrimental to how we talk and identify and treat our own physical bodies. Mm-hmm. And we see it in the Y12SR community. What I love so much about Y12SR is that this is a community that is open to all paths of recovery. Absolutely. This is a community that is open to men and women that not only struggle with substance, but the idea of relationships, food, eating. There is a place for everyone in Y12SR. And sometimes traditional 12-step community doesn't always heal the mind-body connection. We don't get into as much of the heart work. Mm-hmm. Where Y12SR and the program we're putting together, Y12SR and Embody Love Movement, is really this program where we're looking at recovery through the lens of Embody Love Movement and helping individuals find wholeness and radical self-acceptance because accepting ourselves for exactly who we are, and knowing that we can always work. The journey of self-discovery is one day at a time. And I hope that the work I'm doing now, I'm going to be even stronger and more resilient in a year from now. But the person I am today is exactly who I need to be. And finding that acceptance and self-love is what we hope to bring to the Y12SR community.
Ooh, I love it. It's so good. I can feel your passion and your enthusiasm. And I thank you so much for being a part of the Y12SR movement. We are so lucky to have you. Will you let the audience know when your Y12SR meetings are again, and then we'll close?
Sure. You can find us on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 7 to 8:30. Dana Walters and I would love for you to join us, and you can find the meeting information at y12sr.com.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.